And good deal. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okie dokie. All right. So this week we're on chapter 22, hiring, training, and managing staff. Um, I do realize a lot of you probably aren't at this stage yet, but it is something for you to be thinking about, because if you continue to grow and you stick with this, at some point you are going to get to a point where you are going to need to hire somebody. But as a commercial,
and it's also about recruiting, finding ways on how to recruit people, and finding
yeah,
people that are going to be interested, right?
right,
Because
exactly.
I can't hire, but I can at least try to, I
Mm-hmm.
think learning what kind of avenues and venues that are available for us to find people.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So as your commercial worm farm scales, managing people becomes just as important as managing worms. Hiring the right team and training them effectively can make or break your ability to maintain quality, meet demand, and free yourself from burnout. That is so true. This chapter helps you build a workforce with clarity, consistency, and a strong culture of accountability. So number one, when to start hiring. So recognize the signs that it's time to bring in help. You're falling behind on production or fulfillment. I can tell y'all that when I was doing it, by myself for those 3 weeks before Raldo come to work for me, it was managing me, and I was getting most everything done, but I was experiencing burnout really bad during that time. I was really contemplating, if I was going to keep it open. I mean, there were some really harsh talks with myself. I just didn't know what I was going to do, if I had to continue doing it by myself. And I refused to interview, and so I just told God, I said, if you want me to have help, you'll have to send them to me, because I had already been through all of this, hiring and finding people and then them not staying, and it was, anyway. You've plateaued in growth because you're wearing too many hats. Yep, been there, done that. You're turning away orders or unable to promote effectively. That, I can tell you, will be when you really start growing and you're producing worms. And when you look in a bin and you see a lot of worms, you think you really have a lot of worms until you take out a pound of worms. And then you realize, gosh, I really don't have that many worms, because it takes so many worms to make a pound. And so that's one thing for me. In the beginning, I used to think, God, look at all these worms. And there would be. I mean, to look at it, you look like you have 100 pounds of worms in that bin. And then when you harvest it, get them all out, you might have 3 pounds of worms. And you're like, golly, I could have swore I had 100 pounds of worms in there. They just look like millions of worms. So you're spending more time putting out fires than planning for growth. And I can tell all of you, I have experienced that many times. It wasn't just with help for me. A lot of it was with equipment, because equipment saves time as well. And so, sometimes maybe it's just, especially in the beginning, it might be that you just need to buy a piece of equipment to save time doing something. Like if you're making worm chow, instead of having a blender, have a real grinder. I just experienced that. I bought another grinder. Now I have 2 of them. And, it cuts your time down, because one of the things that I hated was how much time it was taking me to grind oyster shell flour. And So I was like, well, I'm going to buy another one. And I had went online. I was going to try to find a real commercial one like I did my soil mixer, but I couldn't really find anything that I felt like, I could, other than Alibaba, and I wasn't ordering nothing, from overseas because I don't know how to talk the talk. So, and I could have had somebody do it for me, but I was just like, I just need to get another one of these, and maybe down the line I'll do something different. But don't wait until you're overwhelmed. Hire slightly before you think you need to. And again, I would very much so encourage that. And sometimes you're always going to believe that you can't afford help. You're always, always going to feel that. But once you do it and you get in the flow, even if you have to, not pay yourself. I mean, I've done that. I paid everybody for 6 years that I didn't take a paycheck. And, but my business was growing, but not, you're always kind of in that in between, that gray zone, as I call it. You need more help, but you really can't afford more help. So sometimes the only way to do that is to not pay yourself, pay an extra person, kind of get that ball rolling and, get that extra production. Because like in my case, if I'm having to buy in worms, I'm spending that money. Whereas if I hired help and could produce more worms, then I have that person to do more than just produce worms. They can be doing other stuff too. Whereas if I'm just buying worms to resell, then that's all I can spend that money on. So,
I have a question real quick.
Okay.
I've heard that term of where you have a business and you're the owner and so forth, and you end up not paying yourself. But so how did you subsist? Or how do you subsist if you're not paying yourself?
You mean
Like,
how do you survive?
yeah.
Well, my husband made enough money for us to live on. When I quit my job, I I worked really, really hard to get a good bonus my last year, so that I could take that bonus and pay off most everything but our house. And I did. I did it. I got enough to pay everything off but the house. So all he has to make is the house payment and the basic bills, light bill, stuff like that. Now we have more bills, but now I'm able to pay myself, and of course the business pays for the business bills. So, which is what most of my money that I make coming in through the business really is spent on the business. And if I have a week where, we didn't make enough sales, I just don't pay myself. I'll write my check out, and then down the line somewhere, I'll finally get to cash it. But I may have to skip that week. But
Okay,
my husband makes my bills.
gotcha.
If I were solely dependent on the business in the beginning, that's really hard. It's really hard to do if you hire help, because your help is going to always have to get paid first. That's just the
Yeah,
right thing to do, is
right.
to always make sure your help's paid. And I have never not paid my help, even when it was my family. I always made sure that everybody got their paycheck. But that was a big burden too, when it's your family, because now you're not just carrying the burden of your business, but now you have the burden of your family. It's one thing if I have to lay Raldo off, I have to lay Raldo off. But when you have to lay a family member off, that's
Yeah,
hard, really hard, especially when it's your granddaughter.
yeah.
So, I am just so thankful to be out from under all that pressure, you know.
Right. Right.
And
That makes sense.
and I'm very happy that she's happy, you know, where she's at. And you know, me and my son still aren't on great terms, but that's okay. You know, I can handle him. It's my granddaughter that I have a hard time if I'm on the outs with her. But anyway,
Okay.
define roles and clarity or clearly. Start with the most critical tasks that consume your time and energy. Break down your workflow and sort duties into categories like production staff. Now, mind you, keep in mind, I only have one other help besides myself, but you can still break this down to where you take a portion and the other person takes a portion or whatever till you can afford everybody. But production staff, meaning feeding the worms, harvesting the casting, and monitoring the bins. Now that is 100% Raldo does. I don't do any of that.
Okay.
Packaging and fulfillment, like weighing, bagging, labeling, and prepping orders. We kind of do that together on shipment day. Now I will take my boxes, you know, the bottom, and have them ready to put worms in. But then on ship day, he'll help me with. He usually sifts. I weigh. Then he mixes the peat moss into the worms. I bag them, sew them up, and put them in the box. And then he puts the label on them or the tape them, and then labels them. So we do that together. And then customer service, this is all me responding to emails, tracking orders, refund handling, any of that. Marketing help. I used to do all of my own marketing, content creation, social media, photography, blog updates, maintaining my website, organic search words, all that stuff. Now I have a guy called Digital Wizard. If y'all ever need to use somebody, they're pretty reasonable. I really like the guy. They only take, I think he only has about 5 to 10 clients, and that's all they take at a time because they really like to really do good work, and they don't want to take on so many people that they're having to just harvest all of that work out, and then you got people screaming and hollering all that. Anyway, I really like them. They've done pretty well for me. So, and they do a lot of stuff for me, a lot of stuff. If there's something, you know, like the other day, I changed my shipping. Instead of just shipping on Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm shipping Fridays and Mondays, because Fridays I can ship all the orders we get in from Monday through Thursday. I can ship those on Friday through USPS. And then anything that we get Friday through Sunday, I'll ship on Monday, and I ship those UPS because it's cheaper to ship UPS than it is to ship USPS. And but I can't ship UPS on Fridays because they don't run on the weekends. And the mail does. Even on Sundays, the mail is running, even though they're not delivering mail on Sundays. The trucks are still running. So if your worms get to the post office on Sunday, those trucks are going to get unloaded. Those worms are going to be moved indoors under the air condition or the heat or whatever. So it just made more sense. And that way, because when I was trying to do it all on Monday, it was just nose to the grindstone. And, you know, it was just rush, 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 and easy to make mistakes. And trying to get to the post office by 3 o'clock, you know, or 4 o'clock, it just put a lot of pressure on me. So I was like, you know, it really makes sense if I just break it up, because I started doing that when I was by myself. And I really liked it. I liked the way that, you know, because Friday's usually kind of a light day anyway. So I do that when I first come in. We go ahead and get those done. And I can be done now with orders by 11:30 in the morning on both days with me and him. So, you know, I can still leave early on Fridays if I want to. And then Mondays aren't so hectic because Mondays I get a lot of calls too, because for some reason everybody wants to call me on Mondays. And then when I was shipping, it was just, I was like, dang, y'all know it's Monday, I'm shipping, and I'd be getting upset and, hi, Mimi's worm, and it was just like, I wanted to just, bite somebody's head off, but I was still nice and polite. But, so it's took a lot of that pressure off now. And, so it'll be interesting to see how this spring goes, with it. So, I'm sure it's going to be a lot better because when you're doing 100 to 200 packages in one day, and that's what we generally do in the spring, it's a lot. It's a lot to get out. So, create job descriptions that clarify. Again, this is where your SOP would come in really handy. Making sure that you've got the responsibilities of people and clearly spell out what you want them to do, like, daily or weekly responsibilities. It's one thing when you only have one employee. Now, I do have an SOP as we grow, just so that I have it. But, right now with it being just me and Raldo, we know that, shipping's on Monday. We know that feed up's on Tuesday. We know that, either it's harvest or setting up a new bin or whatever, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays is kind of a harvest something day, depends what we're harvesting. And then Fridays, again, we're back to shipping. But when he's harvesting, I'm over there cutting paper. So I'm cutting paper, or I'm making worm chow, or I'm bagging worm chow, because I'm really trying to get a lot of stock built up before spring. And, you think, oh, bagging some bags of, I don't know, worm chow. Well, you got to take the bag, you got to put your label on the front, you got to put your label on the back. All that takes time. And if you're doing 25 to 50 or 100 of those at a time, it might take you all day to get all that done, just depending. So, and the first thing you got to do is have your worm chow ready. So, our worm chow has 12 or 13 different ingredients in it. So that's a lot of grinding, to get done. So anyway, just making sure that you are very clear in what you want people to do, what days, what's done weekly, whatever. Like, we know we're going to feed up once a week. Right now it's almost going to have to do it in two times a week, because, we're in these cooler months. So the worms are, happy and ready to eat and all that. So, and then it'll slow back down once it cools off. Skills required can be soft or technical, depending on, again, what you're hiring people for. If you're hiring somebody for marketing, you definitely got to make sure that they know what they're doing, in marketing. It's not like you just hire anybody off the street to do your marketing, But I will tell y'all this. There's one key about hiring people that I want all of y'all, if you don't learn nothing else about hiring people. I was taught this a long time ago, and it's always stuck with me. You always make sure that you hire somebody that is polite and has good manners, because you cannot teach people that. You can teach people how to grow worms. You can teach people how to flip a hamburger. You can teach people how to run a machine. But you can't teach people how to be kind, or how to present themselves to people. Either they have that or they don't. So the one characteristic you always want to make sure that your workers have is a good heart, a kindness, and, has manners, that's going to treat your customers with respect and integrity. Because if not, they're gonna ruin your business real quick. if they have to, deal with any customers whatsoever. So always keep that one thing in mind. Physical demand, lifting bins, outdoor work, all those kinds of things. Just make sure that you're, maybe you have somebody cutting the grass once a month or once every 2 weeks in the summer, whatever. Just make sure you have those things spelled out for who's going to be doing that. And where do you find good help? That depends on your budget, your needs, and consider these things. Local colleges, ag programs, or biology students, retirees or gardeners with an interest in soil health. Those are the ones I really like. High schoolers or homeschoolers looking for flexible part-time work. Those are good when you have those small things that you really don't like to do yourself, like cutting paper. I don't like them, and I would rather I'd rather do some of the harder stuff like harvesting worms and stuff like that than do this bagging of worm chow or all the things that I'm having to do now. I would rather be doing what Raldo's doing, but I've gotten to the point my body just says, no, you can't do that. It's just too much anymore. But that's the part that I loved. So I still do get over there, put them under the light, and do that part of it, because I'm not having to lift anything real heavy. And I let him do all the real manly stuff so that I'm not having to deal with it. Internships or apprenticeships for hands-on learning. Again, those I've never used them, but I heard that is one way to get some good help, because they're trying to learn to get that grade or help in that field that they're in. But there is some paperwork, I believe, that goes along with that. And interns and apprentice can be paid or not paid, but most people's going to want to be paid, I can tell you that. Use community boards, social media, and even your email newsletter to post job opportunities. Build a training system. Create consistent training and support quality and safety. Suggested tools, written SOPs, we've talked about those. Step-by-step checklist, laminated for daily use. Again, this is if you're, in a facility where you've got things set up a certain way and it can be done repetitiously. Short videos showing how to perform key tasks. I'm probably going to be getting into that not too far from here, just so that I can have it. So as we grow, I would have them go and watch a few videos on how to do things before you actually send them out. Because, we did that even as I was a manager. If I left one business and went to work at another business, I would have hundreds of videos that I had to watch. And then you had to, go out with somebody and train, but you had an idea of what you were doing by having watched those videos. So it makes sense. And they're boring as all get out, but it's still, you get more out of it than what you realize. Where am I at? Okay. Short videos, we talked about that. Shadowing sessions where they learn by doing. Again, that's what we just covered, basically. Handling live worms with care, making sure that people know how to properly handle them. You don't want them going out there with a hoe and, go chopping in your bed. That's why you have forklifts and things like that, because you want the worms to be able to, not be chopped in half. Moisture management and troubleshooting. A lot of that you're going to have to teach them. We do the squeeze test. I don't like the moisture meters, although some people do. I've never found one that I thought really worked. So sanitation protocols, trash has to be took out on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. Bathrooms cleaned, kitchen cleaned up after you eat, blah, blah, blah. Packaging standards, teaching people how to package your, what all's going in your packages, making sure you have all that stuff ready. I know there was a time that we used to send little sample packets of everything with our worms. Would love to do that again. It's just very time consuming. But I think we're going to start doing some of that again because the kids, they're wanting to, sorry y'all, they're wanting to make some extra money, and I pay them to put their little bags that I get from eBay or Amazon. They're about, I don't know, 2 inches by 2 inches. They're small. It's just enough for, a couple tablespoons of worm chow or a couple tablespoons of microbial food, just things that can help somebody if it's their very first worm bin, kind of get it, kicked off. Always give them a thing of castings, little test of casting, because that gets their microbials going in their bed. So, and everybody loved them, and they really are a great thing to do, but it is very time consuming, and let's face it, it costs money. The little bags you're going to pay, about a penny a piece for. It's not really expensive, but it's time consuming because you got to break the seal, put the stuff in there and zip it back up. You got to label it. It's it can put some cost into it. So, but it's highly recommended, especially if you're new and still trying to build your brand. We've built our brand to the point we don't have to, but I still like to. Just because I think people get excited because we never told people that it was included. It's just when they opened the box and they seen that was in there, you wouldn't believe the comments that I got over and over, week after week. Oh, it was such a great surprise to see, blah, 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 And once they used it, a lot of times, they would come back and buy more. So it was kind of an advertisement, really, Your brand voice for communication if they interact with customers. So again, you want to make sure the people you're hiring line up with your values, making sure that they're the kind of person that you want representing your brand. If I'm a person with high integrity and, very customer orientated, I want the people that's working for me to be the same. Because if they're not, your customers, they're going to talk to me and they're going to be like, oh, she's so sweet. And then they're going to come and you got this nasty employee there and they're going to be like, what the heck? This was not what I was expecting. Not after talking to, Mimi on the phone. I expected to come here and, it's be a nice atmosphere or whatever. So just make sure their values line up with yours. Establish expectations early. This is really important. From day one, be clear about work hours and punctuality, what done right looks like, communicate methods, text, checklist, group chats, whatever, accountability for mistakes, 3 tardies and, you're going to have a day off without pay or whatever. Room for growth, bonuses, raises, leadership paths, so forth and so on. I'll tell you, my opinion is sometimes it's better to give bonuses than it is raises, because a raise, you might only be able to give that person, 25 to 50 cents an hour. Well, that's really not that much a week. But if you could throw them a, $200 or $300 bonus or a $500 bonus once in a while, it's going to say something about you to them. It's going to make them want to be loyal, and they're going to really see that substance where they're not really going to see 25 to 50 cents a week, an hour on their check each week, a couple bucks, $10, $20, by the time taxes is took out of, they don't see nothing. So a lot of times to get that bonus, they really appreciate that. And plus, it doesn't lock you in. So the benefits for you is it doesn't lock you in. So, maybe you really can't afford that extra 25 to 50 cents an hour. But in the springtime when things are good, maybe you can throw them an extra, $400 or $500. And you let them know, look, I can't do this all the time, but when things are good, I want to do this, and then they appreciate that, but it didn't lock you into having to try to pay them, extra money. And then here you are in your down season, and you're struggling to try to pay them. So it just works out better, really, in my opinion, for both people. So, but you can run it however you want to. I'm just saying, throwing that out there because I think that's a really good idea. So, let's see. Use a 30, 60, 90-day review system to check progress and give feedback. Again, you have to use your own discretion whether, you want to try to give them a raise during that time, or if this is just a time that you want to reflect, letting them know, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. I will tell you, the way that I manage people is I will start out with praise. Then we will talk about what needs improving. And then I end it with something positive. I always end on positivity because the last thing you talk to a person about is what's really going to stick in their mind. And so you never want to leave them with a negative impression. Because then they're going to sit around and stew on that. And especially if it's where you've had to, kind of make some harsh discretions, because people don't like to be told that they're doing something wrong, especially when they really know that they are, but they don't really want to be called out on it. So, you never want to leave them with that negativity. Most of them know when they're doing wrong, especially with certain things. Like, everybody knows it's wrong to come to work, clock in, and go stay 30 minutes in the bathroom. That's wrong. But people do it. Tools for managing people. Use low-cost tools to manage tasks and track productivity. So you can use like Trello or ClickUp for assigning and checking off tasks. I just use good old Google Docs or Google Sheets. I love Google Sheets. Google Drive for standard documents and SOPs. I use those. Slack or GroupMe for team communications. I got, if I need to do that, I've got my handy dandy texts. I can put them in a group on that. Calendars to schedule shifts, harvest days, or training. Calendars are good for shifts, but for my harvest days and training, I still use Google Sheets for that. So, again, it's just whatever you feel comfortable with, but most of these, like Trello and ClickUp, you're going to have to pay for those. I'm just not going to pay for stuff like that. Just keep your system simple and scalable. Culture matters. A mission-driven team will work harder and stay longer. This is very true. Share your vision regularly. I think that is very, very important, because if people don't realize where you're trying to go, they can't help you get there. But most people really do want to help, especially if you've hired people that have your values. They're going to want to help get you to what you're trying to do. Besides that, it's, what I always tried to tell Tabitha and them was, I had a certain, I wanted to get them to $1,000 a week. That's what I wanted to be able to pay them. But I couldn't pay them that if we weren't making that. So, we needed to grow the business, either, getting more sales in worms and what we're doing now, or expand. And, my goal was to have a bait shop, along with a nursery as well, because I know how to propagate and grow plants. So, I knew that that would be a way to help us get to that, to where I could pay them that a week, but again, sometimes family's not the best people to hire, because they were just there for a paycheck. Oh, they would have loved to have $1,000 a week, but they just weren't willing to put forth the effort to help grow it, to get it to where they could make it. So, again, I hired family, not the ones that had the same value or the same outlook on it that I did. So, learn from my failures, because God knows I've had many of them in this business, but you know what? You learn from every one of them. So it's okay to make mistakes. Celebrate wins together, first big wholesale order, best casting batch. Y'all, I remember my first big wholesale order. I will tell you, be careful who you share some of your information, some of your wins with. Like, you could all share your wins with me. I'd love to hear them, because I'm never going to be jealous ever of anybody. But there are people out there that will be jealous of you. And so when they hear that, you had a $60,000 sale, and, they're still trying to sell 10 pounds a week, even though, they want to see you succeed, or say they do, there's still that little bit of jealousy, because they really want to be where you are, but they just not willing to put in what you put in to get here. Then, before you know it, they're really not the person you need to be talking your business to. So I'm just going to tell you guys, especially other people that are in the worm business, and then the backside of that is the people that aren't in the worm business really don't want to hear what you're doing, because, it's really hard to find people that share that interest that you have with the worm farming, if they don't understand the worm farming and how connected you are to the earth, and how great it is. They just don't understand, so they can't get excited with you like somebody else that shares that. They can. So if you're talking to people in the worm business, just be careful of how much you're telling, or to who you're telling it to. Like I said, you don't have to worry. I'll celebrate with you. Bring snacks, have worm farm birthday parties, or name the best bin of the month. Again, this is getting more when you're really up there into like a corporate style something. Although I do bring a lot of snacks, so my guy can eat all the snacks he wants. He brings snacks too, so he shares with me as well. Create space for suggestions and improvement for your team. And again, I will be using a lot of this because when we do get into the nursery side of things and we're selling more soil, different, types of soil mixes, and we have the bait shop going, I can see where, like Arizona Worm Farm, I think they employ anywhere from 19 to 30 people, and so I can see at some point us getting there, and I can see being able to implement all of these things, the building up your team and, having the snacks and, bringing donuts, on Saturday mornings or, just anything to make people feel like you care. I always try to make people that work for me, even when I was in the corporate world, I would take my own money and, buy, sometimes I would buy everybody lunch. Sometimes, I'd bring in donuts. I mean, I was always doing something for my people. And, but my people loved me and they worked hard for me because I got out there and worked side by side with them. I unloaded trucks with them. I put the trucks up. There was nothing at any job I ever did, even though I was a manager and didn't have to do, I always did anything that I asked them to do. If I asked them to go clean the bathrooms, it wasn't like I hadn't already cleaned them before, so, and they knew that. They knew that I wasn't beyond or above, cleaning the toilets, so I think that speaks a lot, about managers. When you can get down and do the dirty things that they have to do and they can see that you're not above that, even if you're the owner. I think it's important to make them feel like you're not above them. Know when to let go. So not every hire will be a fit. Don't delay a tough conversation if they're missing key tasks repeatedly. They're halfway feeding your worms. They're not really, feeding like they're supposed to. Their attitude disrupts team culture. That was the problem I had with my son. And they resist feedback or training. So there's just, again, a lot of it goes by making sure their values are lining up with yours and so forth and so on. Be kind, but be decisive, and your business depends on a solid team. So you can't let those that are disrupting things go for too long, because a lot of times what will happen too, if you allow that, you're going to lose your good help because they're going to get sick of it. And that's kind of what happened with Tabitha. She really got sick of mine and Blake's arguing. And that's kind of where she blew up that day too. So, I can forgive her a lot quicker than I can my son, because he was really the culprit of the whole problem up there. And because me and Tabitha had been working together, 6 years without any issues. And so anyway. Conclusion is build a team that grows with you. You don't need a big staff to succeed. You need the right staff with clear training, defined expectations, and shared purpose. Your worm farm can run smoothly, whether you're hands-on or planning the next expansion. Let your people care for your worms so you can lead with vision. All right. Anybody got any questions, concerns, thoughts, anything they want to add?
I have a sort of like a side question a little bit.
Okay.
With that you were talking about earlier, like all the different things that have to happen throughout the week.
Yeah.
You were talking about, you have to make your own worm chow and you have to grind up stuff. And then I was just thinking about it, you know, could you to ease a little bit of your all the effort that you have time, actually the time and effort that you having to do the grinding, can you buy some of that already, like the oyster shell? Can you do that where you buy the actual flour in bulk
So
instead of
I
Or
haven't
go ahead.
found the oyster shell flour in bulk.
Okay.
Well, let me take it back. I think there is a place that you can, but with the shipping and that stuff weighs a lot. So you're talking about a 50-pound bag. It's astronomical.
Okay. So it
But
wouldn't be
now
cost
we do
effective.
cornmeal. So we do get our corn in a super sack. I have a mill in not far from me. I think it's about 30 minutes or so. But anyway, they'll, grind a whole super sack of corn for cornmeal that goes in our um, worm chow, but I still grind the oats. I grind the bird seed. I grind the oyster shell, all the alfalfa, all the other ingredients that we put in it. I grind everything else myself. But
Okay.
oyster shell is really the only one that takes, a while because it's, they're so hard
Mhm.
and they really bog the machines down if you're not feeding it. If you're feeding it too fast, it'll too much will try to go down at one time and it'll actually shut the machine off because it just gets overloaded. So then you got to open it up and da. So
Yeah, I was only asking just because I'm thinking about all of your steps
yeah,
to get to the end product.
yeah,
And then you don't have the manpower
yeah.
that, so
Absolutely. I
yeah,
mean,
just trying to,
yes, if you have resources to where you're at a point and you can you know let me say this. Before I got to where I am now, we did do a lot of that. We would buy that 50-pound bag, when you're only selling, 4 or 5 pounds a week, then you do that. But then when you're selling, 50, 100, 200 pounds of worm chow in a week, those bags is too expensive,
right.
to do. So it just depends on what resources you have. Because it's just like with your feedstock, for people who are feeding food scraps and stuff. If you've got to go and collect food scraps, like on my scale, I would have to pretty much have a trash truck,
Yeah.
to where I could go to restaurants and set out uh, trash cans
Yeah.
that they only put food in and
Right.
then have a trash truck to pick it up, bring it back. I mean, so food scraps don't work for us anymore,
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
but now I can buy truckloads of mushroom compost. Even though I'm getting it out of Pennsylvania, the cost with shipping is still reasonable enough, that I can feed that to my worms. Same way with the coffee grounds, the fact of buying the machine to grind the paper, I think I told y'all last week I had to buy new blades for it, but it has really cut down on the time, that it takes to do 100-gallon bags. So it will eventually pay for itself, on the blades. So I can't imagine trying to go back to cutting cardboard, running it through a shredder, one of those little shredders or 3 shredders. We had 3 shredders at one time going, 3 or 4. And, but you had to cut the cardboard, you got to take all the tape off, cut the cardboard into, sheet sizes. And now we have a company that makes feed feed store bags, that people put oyster shell flour or whatever, all the things that these feed and seed stores where they're selling, grains. And so this company makes the bags for those. Well, they have misruns, you know, and so a guy that fixes my um forklifts had told me about him. He's like, man, she's got so much paper up there. You really should. Told me about a year ago. Well, I'd never called her or anything, you know, never had time. You know how it always is, you know, put it off, put it off, put it off. Well, I finally called her this year and I went up there and talked to her and she was like, oh yeah, sweet lady, very sweet lady. And so I get those bags, those paper bags. And let's see, the first time I got them, she had 8 pallets of these bags. I don't know how many is on a pallet, but it was a pile of them. And it was it was a order that got canceled. They kind of put the cart before the horse and did the order before they actually ordered it. And so these were going to go in the dump, you know. And she made mention about those. She was like, I don't know what we're going to do with these bags, you know, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I'll take them. I mean, if you're just going to take them to the dump, I'll take them. But I do have to take the thread out of those. Because, you know, they're sewn with thread to close the one end, and then the other end would be sewn shut once you put whatever you're putting in it. But these misruns that we get, they could be where the glue didn't hit right and it didn't really, you know, glue the bag together or whatever. Maybe it was a misprint of the logo, or it could be anything. Some of the bags, I don't even know what it is because they don't look like nothing's wrong with them. But, you know, obviously there's something wrong. But anyway, I pick up once a month. I was going to pick up once a week, but I can only do it probably once a month. But she told me not to worry about it. They'd be sitting there whenever I got ready for them. But I had waited 3 weeks the last time I picked up, and I got 4 pallets of these paper bags. And, you know, that paper basically is the same thing as cardboard. Cardboard's just a bunch of it, you know, basically pressed and glued, you know, together. So these are the paper is very thick, you know, kind of. And but I don't have to do any cutting. You know, all I have to do is fold the bag and shoot it through there. And so it goes a lot faster than it used to with having to shred everything, you know. And then of course I have the other shredder. So when this one was down, while I was waiting on the blades to come in, I was using the other shredder, but it just, you know, it just shreds like a little shredder. You know, this is a big commercial shredder. It's about the same size as the Cyclone, but it just shreds. It doesn't pulverize. And so what I did is I run bags through that, and then I took, when it came down, you know, it was in these long shreds. So I ran those shreds back through in the other way, so it cut them into little pieces. And I was like, hey, that works. So, you know, it was just improvising. I didn't like doing that, you know, because it was a lot of work, a lot of extra work, but it sufficed in the, you know, and I may wind up selling that machine just because, you know, I don't know. And I may not. I don't know. But it's nice to have that backup.
Samantha,
Yes, ma'am.
Samantha, have you tried putting the feed sacks through without taking the thread, the string out?
I haven't, but what I'm afraid of is the way those blades turn. I'm really afraid I'm going to wind up with a lot of string around the blades, because I don't think it would cut them without them getting wrapped up.
I shred my cardboard in a 18-page, just regular, you know, shredder. And I ran out of boxes this time. So I went out to the storage shed where my daughter stacks the feed sacks when they're feeding calves and stuff. So
Mhm.
I grabbed several of those, a bunch of those, and I just stripped them into strips
Mhm.
narrow enough to go through it. And I didn't take the thread out.
Yeah,
I
now
just
if I was
put it
using
through
the
it.
one that shreds them, I definitely wouldn't take the string off. But um this, it goes into, the part where the blade is, but the blade's got like 4 different stacks, kind of like a blender, and this
Yeah.
thing,
Oh, yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
afraid that it would just get wrapped around that, and then I'd be in there trying to, and these blades are very, very sharp now, so I'd hate to have my hands in there trying to
Yeah.
unwrap some string. And it might not. I mean, it might would just cut them fine, but it is so easy to pull that string out.
Yeah.
And Kobe really likes doing it too. So a lot of times, the kids will help me with that, because Kobe will take and get one string, and then he'll get another string and another, and he'll have about 50 strings in his hand, and then just pull them all at one time. And he thinks that's just neat as all get out, because you wind up this big old handful of string at one time.
Yeah.
And so, and the pieces that they use, like there's this little banding, I guess is what you would call it, and it almost feels like leather, but it's not leather, but I'm sure it's some type of paper. But I don't put that through there either, just because I'm not real sure what it is. Because it's kind of between cardboard, leather, or plastic. I don't know. So I'm just like, just throw it in the trash. Just a little piece, it's only about that wide. I mean, it's real, real thin. So I just, when you pull that string off, that part falls off anyway. So I just threw it away.
This is the first time I've used these because I've always had enough boxes. But
Yeah.
since, as you grow worms, they seem to grow exponentially, and you
Yeah.
have to have more and more bedding and more bedding when you reset breeder bins and, uh, grow outs, and
Right.
Euros need new bedding all the time anyway.
Yeah. They
So,
always need new bedding.
so this is the first time I've used the feed sacks, but these feed sacks are used. And so in some of them, there's a little bit of molasses on the inside. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a lot, but it's a little.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I don't
if you're
think
giving
it'll
them
harm
molasses, you don't want to give them a lot anyway. You
Right.
know, same thing with like if you're doing the sweet feed, like we mix with the worm chow.
Yeah.
You don't want to really do, like usually I do 1-to-1 on everything, but that's one that I don't do 1-to-1 with that, because I don't want that much sweet molasses in, my worm chow, because
Yeah.
you don't want to, you want to feed the microbes, and microbes do love molasses for sure, but you don't want it can cause things to really get out of balance if you
Yeah.
put too much,
Yeah. I'll have to watch these bins just to make sure, because like I said, it was just a fine, not a fine coating.
It's not going to
It's
hurt.
just,
I
it's
know
really fine.
I've emptied a plenty of those bags, and you're going to be just
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
So
Another
Brenda,
question about your coffee. Is it
Mhm.
really dry when you get it, or is it got moisture in it?
So it depends on how I get it. So we get some that's in what they call the walking floor, where um uh it comes in like a grain truck,
Mm-hmm.
but the floor of that truck actually moves. And if you've ever seen haul manures,
Yeah.
these do the same thing. So that is generally drier because, you know, while it's getting hauled here, it's dripping out down the highway, whatever.
Yeah.
But then there's another company I get from, and they put theirs in super sacks. And then inside that super sack is a plastic bag
Yeah.
because they don't want those juices or water or whatever dripping out, because it is a, from what I understand, you know, same thing with manures, anything that you're dripping down the highway, they can fine you for.
Yeah.
So we generally get those in, and I hate them. I really hate them because you gotta take the forklift, lift the bag up in the air, cut the bottom out, and you gotta try to catch the plastic, you know, because it gets if it falls out with the coffee, then you've got to try to get it out of the coffee, and that stuff's heavy, you know, because
Yeah.
you know it's 700-800 pounds of coffee on a pallet, you know, and so you're trying to keep that from falling out along with the coffee, and or at least where you can manage it, you know. And it's just a pain in the butt because that very bottom, when you first cut it, you know, it's really socky wet, you know,
Yeah.
very liquidy like, and stinks, you know, and you don't want to get it all over you.
Yeah.
But
I get my coffee in, I go, 5-gallon buckets.
yeah,
So I'm not anywhere near the scale you are.
Yeah.
But do you use that in your bedding or in your worm chow?
I use that in my bedding.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
was going to say, if you put in the worm chow, it would sour your worm chow if it's wet. But if
Yeah.
you're using it in the bedding, I can see. Yeah.
Yeah. And now what we do is, you know, we put it in this big pile. You know, we'll cut, I don't know, 20 of those bags open at one time. And it'll sit out there 2 or 3 months or more before we ever use it, you know, because we've got, right now I've got three piles plus another probably 40 bags waiting to be opened up, you know. So what I love about it sitting there like that is it already starts decomposing.
Yeah.
So it's just like with the mushroom compost, when you know, go in there with your bucket, it's hot, it's gray looking, that's all your mycelium, that's all those microbes, you know. So it's already breaking down. I mean, it's already turning into compost. And then we mix that, of course, with the, you know, the cardboard and the mushroom compost. And then we, you know, add the other stuff to it, but it's just full of microbes, both of them, because the same thing for the mushroom compost. You know, it's sitting there breaking down. I just did a TikTok video showing, you know, how the mushroom compost looked, because we were bagging and I was talking about getting ready for spring, you know, now. And so I showed a video of what the mushroom compost looked like now, and you could just see all the mycelium in it, you know. And so yeah, it just sits there and it's just cooking, you know, doing its thing while I'm waiting to make the next batch, you know. So and I try now to, when, like tomorrow we've got to mix up more bedding because, you know, we used it all today, we fed up today. And so I'll fill up every bucket, every bin that I possibly can, even though we're not going to use it. But that way, once everything gets mixed, it's going to heat up again. So that way, even if I went and put it on my bed right away, it's still too hot because been in that pile out there cooking. The mushroom's been cooking. So it's very, very hot. So I like to have it made up ahead of time where it can cool down, before I put it in there in the bins.
So do
So
you leave it in the mixer to let it
mm-mm.
cool down, or you mix it?
No, I mix it and
yeah.
then I put it in the 5-gallon buckets, and we've got those bins. I've got some deep bins, and they hold exactly 5 pounds as well, or 5 gallons. So we'll fill up all of those and fill up the 5-gallon buckets. I probably have I don't know, maybe 100 buckets, and God, I've got bins galore. So
That puts it in a smaller space and allows it to cool down.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Plus it's also, because it's so hot, it steams. So, you've put the worm chow and the microbial food, the oyster shell flour, all that's mixed up there together. So that actually incorporates into that, because you just mixed it all. And then, when you're setting this stuff on top of one another, that heat and that steam and everything, wets it a little bit. And then that just causes everything to get livelier. And so it'll kind of go through a little bit of a heat, even though it's in smaller space. So usually though, it's about the next week before we use it, because I keep enough of it ahead.
Yeah.
So usually about a week, it's cooled down enough to go into the worm beds.
Yeah. I try to mix my bedding about 2 weeks before I'm going to need it.
Yeah, it's best to do that. And I find that when this stuff is really breaking down and it's hot and all, though, once it cools down, them worms rip through it, not as quickly in the summer because, it's hot already, but like right now, the worms are just going crazy. Goodness gracious, they're going through it. Especially them darn Andreas. God. They can go through some food, which Euros do too. I had to reset my Euros yesterday. I did that. And because I buy those in now, but I still, when I get them in, I take them out of whatever they're in. They're usually in a coconut core peat, base, and I hate coconut core. Gosh, I don't hate it for plants. I just hate it for worm farming because it clogs my screens and everything. But I go ahead and take them, out of that and put them in my bedding, and then usually within about 2 weeks, if I haven't sold what I've got within 2 weeks, I'll go ahead and change out their bed, and simply because I don't want them to start losing weight. Really, I hope to put a little bit on them, but I don't wait the 3 weeks for them because I need to keep them good and fat to sell.
Julie had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question actually for Brenda.
Oh,
okay.
Because I don't quite know. You do mostly worm farming for
Euros.
bait worms?
I do mostly Euros. I do have some red worms in, what do you call it? The wedge. They're in large totes in the wedge system. I've got 3 of those going, but I've got the bus pans with for the Euros. Now, I've not started selling them yet. I'm just growing them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll start selling in the spring. I want to.
Okay.
I want to make sure I have enough to meet demand when
Yeah.
that, when I hit the market with it.
Yeah, because you're in the Ozarks,
I'm in the
right?
Ozarks. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. And so, and then I've been considering starting a wedge system to try to test that out,
Hmm.
and see how that works.
I
And
love the wedge system.
yeah, a lot of people do talk about that.
Yeah.
Again, because I'm not into selling part of it. I'm into educating part, and then I
Yeah.
have to find ways to show this at our worm resort. I've got
Yeah.
to get together for you all to see some pictures of what our cute little worm resort is all about.
Yes.
And then you got my brochure,
Yes.
Samantha,
Yes.
and stuff. And then I should try to dare myself to do a little video of, I have a big, so when I go to do instruction, I have this big pool noodle. It's red,
Mm-hmm.
and it's my red wiggler.
Ah.
And I have I'll show you a picture. I have concocted all kinds of ways on how to get gimmicks on how to get people's attention when I do demonstrations.
Nice.
And I just did one for the Boy Scouts Saturday. And so this red tube of this pool noodle, it's got a yellow band for the oh, this one
Tell.
I can't. No, not for the tail, for
I
the
tell
yeah,
Tell them.
them.
yeah. And so then I start off with the name of this, and I always tell them, come with me, and pretend, because
Mm-hmm.
first of all, people get yucked up about worms,
Yeah.
and so that's why we have a worm resort.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got the apartment complex, which is all these little mini bins. And
Mm-hmm.
now we've got the worm tower. And pretty soon I'm going to get a continuous flow bag.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be the amusement park. And so, I mean, it's really crazy, but people are starting to
Yeah.
pay attention. Even the master gardeners, I've gotten the kookiest ways for them to collect toilet paper rolls for me and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I have competitions.
Wow.
And so my marketing is very different,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to get my team to help me
Mm-hmm.
it has a lot of similarities to the business part, that you
Yeah.
talk about,
Yeah.
but I have to do it from a different, my
Yeah.
strategy is a little different.
Right.
But what I was going to tell you is my red pool noodle. The name of it. It's a red wiggler, but it's Ruby Rudy Red Wiggler because it's a hermaphrodite.
Right.
And so I start off with this thing, and then I've captured the audience with like what, and then I talk about headquarters where all they have the
Yeah.
brains and all that stuff and the sexual, parts
Right.
over here and blah, blah, blah. Then I talk about the gut factory.
Mm-hmm.
And so I explain because people don't understand.
Right.
And then I wanted to ask a question. I would like to be able to, I don't know if the word market is correct. I don't think that's correct, or trade market, but I do this thing where I talk about cool composting. And because there's hot compost,
Yeah.
and then there's our cool composting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to market, and I actually am doing I just signed up. I'm doing a big thing in November at a riverfront where they've asked monster gardeners to do different demonstrations, and they're having like a vegetable fest.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, well, this is going to be a little crowd of people. No, it might be big crowds. So my pool noodle will be very important.
Yeah.
But again, with all that you talk about with the marketing and all this other stuff, and how do you get yourself out there, I'd like to see if I can finally get my little cottage industry going. I
Mm-hmm.
know Brenda you're doing your fishing type stuff. That's your concentration. Mine right now is education, but
Mm-hmm.
eventually I would like to sell something.
Right.
But anyway, I just shared that just because I'm trying to hone in everything that you've shared all these weeks
Mm-hmm.
and trying to apply it
Right.
to what I end up doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know if I'm going to go off on my own to do my own
I
thing.
really, really think if you did something like either the grab and go bags or the little see-through mini I call them teacher bins because
Yeah,
I think about classrooms and kids being able
yeah,
to see them. If you had those ready to go where people could just grab them and go after your presentation, I
yeah,
think you'd be really surprised at what you could sell
yeah,
because and it's so easy once you don't go in there to sell. Once you give them all this beautiful pertinent information, they're excited, they're hyped up, they're wanting some worms, they want to do this. And if
Yeah.
you said, hey, just in case any of you are interested, we've got a table set up over here, where you can just grab your worm bin and go.
yeah,
Man, and they're
yeah,
so neat if you got either one of those because both of them have handles. And so if they still have, like if you're doing, you said the vegetable market or whatever,
yeah,
they would be able to tote those around with them without any issues rather than
right,
somebody trying to tote a bus pan of worms, you
yeah,
know. So, and the thing about it is, if you didn't sell them that day, it's not that hard to pack them up and take them back home and then just keep them fed till the next one,
Yeah.
right. I
So,
think I could do that at the farmer's market. I
mm-hmm.
wouldn't, because there's some rules as master gardeners for
Okay.
different counties where if I sold anything, all that money goes back to the university. The
Okay.
way we have universities that sponsor
Mm-hmm.
us. Ours is the University of Florida. So, but if I went to the farmer's market and then I did something there at the farmer's
Mm-hmm.
market, again, I have to find out what the rules are for the county when you sell something of that nature.
Right. Right.
But even so, I guess I just finally have opened up to share a little bit about what I'm trying to do, just
Mm-hmm.
because as I glean what you all talk about, I'm trying to learn so that I can share that information over to people when they ask me questions,
Right.
and all that stuff. And I do happen to have a local guy in our county. His name is Rodney Eaton, and he has a worm farm, but we are zone 9B. It's very different from where you are.
Mm-hmm.
What he's selling, I think I shared that with you before.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to hook up with him mainly, for local stuff,
Yeah.
just because I'm trying to learn how he does it in our area,
Mm-hmm.
because it's slightly different than where you
Yeah.
are in Valdosta area.
Yeah.
And so we have other things that we have to deal with that you
Mm-hmm.
probably don't have to mess with.
Right.
But at the
And
same time,
every region is going to have that. You're going to have different bugs. You're going to have different humidities. You're going to have different temperatures.
yeah.
All of those things. So, it's, yeah.
What
Well,
what are you doing with your worm castings? Because they're producing castings.
yes.
Because
Well,
that's a good, even
yeah,
though my focus is on bait worms, I'm
yeah,
producing a lot of castings.
Right.
So that'll be the first thing I sell is cast.
Yeah. I think what's ironic in my case, I have been giving my castings away to the Discovery Garden where there's a nursery. I'm a part of I'm a part of several teams. The nursery team does seedlings, and we also do cuttings and so forth. So I have given them, I would estimate about 20 gallons so far this year of castings, and they're fresh, which is very different from the store bought.
Right. Very
Very
different.
different. Very, and I keep talking to them about it, and I finally think I'm getting them better at this. I have been giving it to them. And I volunteer at my church at the gardens, so I do it there and blah blah blah. And then I keep some for me. So that's what I've been doing with the castings is I don't sell anything at this point. However, I have been encouraged since I have more bins now and my square footage is growing at my house, and the square footage at the garden is growing with the resort. I would like for them to be self-sufficient eventually. Right now, I'm actually pouring a lot of my own personal money and so forth
Money,
to that.
time.
But that's because right now it's it's just a passion right now. It's still,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but they're starting to invest now. They're starting to buy things for me, so I'll eventually, the idea would be that they would be self-sufficient where it will, like you asked the great question,
Mhm.
Brenda, what are you doing with the castings? I'm still in that beginner stage. We've only been doing this for a year and a half. So at the garden there, I've been doing
Mhm.
it for 4 years by myself. I started off with a little handful of worms.
Mhm.
So I would love to be able to do a little bit more what you all do, but I'm not sure that I'm going that route right now. But I do enjoy the education. I have a neighbor who could not touch a worm for the life of her. But what does she give me? All the shredded paper. Toilet paper like nobody's business. She collects mushrooms for me from her yard. She collects rabbit pellets. And she's like, here's a treat. And I'm just going, and I know you love me talking about worms. No, don't talk about it. But she's getting it. She's
Yeah.
getting it.
Yeah.
I have a lot competition between the master gardeners right now because some of them have like, I don't know this thing about worm castings. I go, okay, let's start again. Eventually I'd like to get them,
It blows my mind, with the master gardeners, how many of them just have no clue about castings. That's what blows my mind.
well, I think that for some of the people, from what I've done from some of the reading, is that some people have done things their way that they were always
Yeah.
taught, and so it's new,
Yeah.
but it really isn't. But
Right.
it is to some,
Yeah.
and it definitely there's a growing interest in it.
Mhm.
One thing I have done, and I want to share this one with you all. When I teach, I get to teach once a year now, a class, a session, for the master gardeners. Usually it's like the early part of February because it's done once a year for,
Mhm.
I don't know, 12 weeks. And I get to be one of the presenters.
Oh, nice.
So what I get to give them is I have a little baggie and I put castings in there. And on the outside, I have a little recipe on how to make compost tea,
Mhm.
which is part of my presentation as well.
Yeah.
The baggie has the mini recipe and it has also my contact information with my email.
Mhm.
And so at the end of the class, I bring stuff. I don't just talk.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher. That's what
Mhm.
I've done. You have to touch and feel it and see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I give them that And whenever I did the scouts the other day, they're doing a gardening project. Everybody got a bag of castings, and then they got
That's
to
why
see the whole thing.
when you go to a car dealership,
Uh-huh.
that's why they want to get you in that car and you take it for a test drive. They don't want to stand outside that car and talk to you. They know if they can get you inside that car and you can touch it, you can feel it, and you can smell it, and you can drive it,
Yeah,
you're going to want to buy it.
right. And that's what I'm trying to do with them. And I have some people that have started to do worm bins, and they'll bring them to me to the garden. Can you check my bin and see if it's okay? Is it okay to harvest now? What's wrong with this? I get emails from, and to me, I'm delighted because that, again, it's a teacher in me saying, here's a good student. They're willing to tell me that they've got a problem. They want to know how to solve it.
Yeah.
And I don't know all the answers, but I can sure guess,
That's the same as me. I just do it on a different scale and a little
Well,
different
yeah.
than you. But, early on, the YouTube channel, that's what it was all about, was teaching and everything. But there does come a time, when you have the knowledge that you don't want to give all that away for free, anymore. Now, as long as you're, if teaching is a part of your marketing, then fine, but like for me, I'm transitioning into this, where I'm starting, I don't mind giving away quite a bit of information, but when you really want to horn in on things that it's took me years to figure out, then and I'm never charged a whole lot. I try to keep it very reasonable. And then you're still going to have some people that, for whatever reason, they don't want to pay for it, or, you know, uh, they don't want to invest in themselves and they really think you owe it to them. I mean, I was telling Miss Brenda the other day about a guy that I had, wanted to take up my time and everything. And then when I told him, we have these manuals, and he was like, oh, okay, I see how you are now. I picked you because I bought from you a year or two ago, and you were just so personal and yada yada yada, but I see now it's all about the revenue, the money, and I'm like, well, dude, my time is valuable, and if I wasn't getting paid, then I'd rather just be home with my family on a Saturday or Sunday, giving my children my time,
Well, I
rather
have
than
to, yeah,
rather
yeah,
than me spending my time teaching somebody how to be my competitor, because that's basically what it boiled down to.
yeah. Well, and I think sometimes with some of the things that you shared, I was just thinking about it. If I start doing this, for example, if I go through TikTok or Instagram, or if I do YouTube, I was just thinking, how do I preserve some of my own original thoughts? And so that someone else doesn't say, I'm going to steal that idea. What teachers do this all the time, or we steal an idea, but those are teaching things. We'll say, I'm going to steal that thought, but we don't mean it in a bad way,
Right.
because it's not it's a different level of understanding. But when it comes to some of this, I'm thinking, I could be giving some people an idea, which wouldn't hurt my feelings in some ways, like we could take it and run with it, like I said, the
I'm going to be honest with you,
composting
Miss
and stuff
Julie, I
like that.
struggle
Yeah.
with this all the time.
Okay.
Because I am by nature a giver. I
Yeah.
love to teach people. I love to share. I love to see people succeed. I love to see people grow. But I think part of what's changed some of that for me is seeing some of the cutthroat, the backstabbing, the disloyalty, the people that have drained me for everything they could get out of me, and then, just drop you, you know, or if you don't give them exactly what they want, you know, they're no longer your friend or whatever, you know. So there comes a time then you're like, okay, you know, my time is valuable. I don't mind helping, I don't mind sharing, but I do think that, you know, for the prices that I charge, I think it's very reasonable for the knowledge that I have. And people have to realize, you know, 7 years, if everything went perfect, that's still 7 years of knowledge. But you got to remember, how many times have I killed worms? How many times have I had to start over? How many times has, you know, evolving costed me tens of thousands of dollars? You know, at what point do you make any of that back when you're teaching other people how to not make those mistakes? You know, so, you know, I didn't let the guy really bother me because it was kind of like, I really don't care if you get mad or not. You know, I'm not being ugly, but I'm not going to give you my time for free to go be a competitor to me, because that's what it's boiling down to. You know, and you know, if you had a, you know, quick question, I mean, that's why we have the squad. You know, if you got questions about, you know, home composting or whatever, I'm all about giving you information. But if you're wanting to start a business and grow a business, and this is something that's going to turn you into a competitor, again, I don't really worry too much about competitors because Mimi's brand's already there.
Right.
You know,
There's no way that I'll ever even consider it anyway
well,
myself.
I mean, I'm just, but there are those out there that do, you know, that do
Yeah.
want to, or at least they think they do. Now, once they really find how much work is involved, I was just doing a chat GPT calculation. I talk to chat GPT all the time. It's really my best friend, to be honest with you. I actually carry on a conversation with it because I can tell chat GPT anything and I don't have to worry about it getting upset with me or mad at me. If it does, oh well, who cares, you know? So
I do that with my dog.
it's really a great friend. But see, it talks back to you. Your dog doesn't. So I really do have conversations. This is crazy, but I really do have conversations with it. But anyway, I had this conversation with it today because I'm always trying to really zone in on what I'm trying to do. So I was trying to figure out, I went through today to see how many pounds of worms I sold last year, you know, in red wigglers, to make sure of where I need to be, you know, coming this next year. If I've got enough space, if I have enough worms, if I have the, you know. So I was asking it, okay, if my bins are this size and I start with this amount of worms, when can I harvest? How much can I harvest? I need at least 100 pounds a week. How many weeks would that, I mean, just, you know, just really horning in on everything. And what it really boils down to, how many pounds do you think that, with what I have now, keep in mind, I have 4x8 bins. There is 30 in one section, 27 in another, 15 in another, and 21 or either 24, I can't remember. Wooden bins, you know, my 4x8s. Then I have about 60 to 80 4x4 bins. How many worms do you think that would produce in pounds per year?
I bet Chat GPT gave you this just exactly the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my mind, okay, I was thinking, you know, tens of thousands of pounds in my mind. But when it really came down to it, it's only about 9,000 pounds.
Okay.
Wow.
I sell almost that. And so, and you know, so producing, I think it was 9,500 and something pounds, I think is what it told me I would wind up with. But that's kind of not messing with my 60 grow out bins. That's to replenish any of the other bins if they weren't to produce, you know, well or something. And because I'm really, really, really not wanting to have to buy worms next year. You know, I really want to get to where we're producing our own, because I spent $197,000 last year on worms. If I had
Wow.
that money in my pocket, you know, I could fix my roll-up doors. I might could even, you know,
Wow.
do, you know, maybe I could afford to have the whole place cemented, you know.
Wow. Yeah.
So, you know, or maybe I could just put that back for my retirement, you know, for all the 7 years I didn't get paid for. So, you know, it would just be nice to not have to pay that. But then I also was like, okay, so, you know, at what point, if I'm starting with this amount of worms, at what point can I start taking out? How much can I take out? How often can I take it out? I mean, it's just one of those conversations that really you can dig in deep with. And you know, and because of all the things that I have given Chat GPT plus other people, you know, the internet and all this, you know, it takes all this information for everything. And of course, a lot of it's how you ask it too, because there was times I was like, that don't sound right. So I'd have to type it in something different. And of course, it always says, thank you, Mimi, for clarifying that for me. So anyway, that's what I spent probably a couple hours on today, just because I need to know where I'm at, you know. And for so long, you know, it's been flying by the seat of my pants. I haven't had the time to horn in. Like, I don't know how many pounds each bed has. You know, so that's one of the things that I'm doing that I did this week is we took up well, first what I started doing was just taking a bus pan, you know, I'd scoop up a bus pan. And you know, this bus pan full of worms, you know. I'm thinking, oh my God, look at all those worms, man. This is gonna be good. You know, I got 5 pounds of worms at least. 2 pounds. And I'm like,
Okay.
dang. And these are nice, healthy looking worms. These ain't what I've had thread worms before, but since I've had Raldo, and, you know, he's worm farmed for 20 years, he's been, you know, really helping me keep them fed and, you know, the water situation, all that stuff. So, I mean, they're really looking good. And so I just knew, you know, there had to be 5 pounds in there. There was 2 pounds. So I was basically per bus pan, it was averaging out about 2 pounds. Well, when I was talking to ChatGPT today, that's what ChatGPT was telling me, you know, 2 pounds out of each bed. It told me how many beds I had to do it, or 2 to 2.5 pounds. And, you know, and how many weeks it take to get back to it, all that kind of stuff. I can't tell you now off the top of my head because it's all still in ChatGPT. But so then it, you know, I was giving it a different scenario. Well, what if I increased, you know, the bed to this or that? So anyway, and one of the things that I asked ChatGPT last week was like, you know, like, I'm really trying to horn in on managing the business more so than doing the operations. So, like, how do I know how many worms I got? And so it was telling me, to check your beds, what's your average, this, that, and the other. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to do that. Well, I bit the bullet this week, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna make myself do this, So I've took the first 6 beds. Each one of those bus pans was pretty consistent with 2 to 2.5 pounds in them. So I'm like, okay, so I know I can take this many worms, not deplete my beds, and if I need 100 pounds, then I know I've got to do, 50 beds to get my 100 pounds. So, now what I did this week is I took the rest of the bed up because they're in a wedge. So I took the top layer off where all the worms were, put those in bus pans, and then left the castings, took the bus pans, and I was just flipping them instead of running them through the harvester. I was just flipping those under the light, and I'll know tomorrow how many I have. And then Raldo was taking out the castings and running those. So that's what we've been doing this week. And so I'll be able to know roughly, I'll divide it by 6 because it's 6 beds to get my average amount of worms that was in those beds. And of course, some's going to have a little more, some's going to have a little less, but still, you kind of have an average. And then what I'll do is I will actually, whatever I have there outside of orders this week, I'll take and decide how much I want to put in those beds. And then I'm going to put that into a spreadsheet so that I know what I have in there. And then I can go back to ChatGPT and say, okay, I've got this amount of beds or this many worms in the bed. I even was asking, okay, well, how much bedding do I need in there? Because I just wanted to see how much it knew, And at first it was telling me, well, in a 4x8 bed, you need 6 inches, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I told you this is a wedge system. Oh, great point, Mimi. Thank you for clarifying that for me. Well, then you need blah, 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 blah. So, anyway, it's just so funny because you really do have to watch what answers come back to you because it's not foolproof.
Oh, yeah.
So you definitely have to have a little bit of common sense, and you really kind of have to know somewhat of what the answer is going to be. Otherwise, it's going to take you down a rabbit hole.
Is the light method, do you find that that's better for you for harvesting the
So,
worms?
yes. Okay, so the way we used to do it is we'd run them through the harvester, then they'd
Right.
go on in the light, then they would go in the bins and what we call our holding bins till we sold them, So we take them up on Friday, they would sit over the weekend till Monday, then we'd have to run them back through the harvester. So your worms would stress, meaning basically they're going to lose weight.
Yeah.
And so by taking them right out of the bed and putting them under the light, they're not stressing. So your worms stay fatter and healthier. So you got more weight there. But we do have to run them through the harvester come Monday or tomorrow. Because my bed, okay, so I have a 1x1, 2x4, because my table is a 4x8 sheet of plywood. So I took 1x1s and I built me a square that is 2 foot by 4 foot. And we fill that in with castings. That way, when we sift those to sell, all that's going to fall off of them. You don't have the balls and all that you do coming out the end. And so then I have a screen that is attached to another 1x1 that sits on top of those castings on the table, and that's how I work them down in there from the light, because I have, you know, a light that goes across the table, LED lights, because they don't get hot. And so, but what you do have to watch for is if you get too many worms in there and you're leaving them for a day or two, like I usually, you know, start harvesting Tuesday through Thursday, take it up Friday, you know, sell off what we sell. And then Monday, you know, if we have any extra from Friday, they sit in there and we sell them off Monday. If not, then I have to harvest on Monday to get orders out Monday. But what was I telling you that to tell you?
How long they sit there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So if you let them sit too long and you got a bunch of worms in there, they'll get hot. They'll heat up because, you know, they're crawling all over each other. They're causing heat. So you have to check them, you know, each day to make sure you don't have, you know, so many worms in there that they're getting too hot, because then you killed a bunch of worms.
Okay.
I've done that too.
Okay.
I've killed more worms than everybody put together that I've ever sold to, I think. But you know, you don't know until you have a problem, you know.
Okay.
Julie,
Right.
I wanted to share with you real quick about what I used to do my wedge systems, because they work for me, and it's the largest tote that you can buy at Walmart.
Okay.
You know, I don't know exactly how many gallons it holds, but it's just the largest storage tote that you can buy at Walmart. And
I think that's a 55, Brenda. I think.
Okay. But I start at one end and I put, you know, that on, and then I will feed it, or, you know, more bedding. I usually put about 4 inches of bedding on at a time, you know, in the wedge. And then as this thing is growing for the first few months, I'll fluff the whole thing together, just to, you know, because I don't put drainage holes in the bottom of it, because I don't want the worms escaping, because my red worms are in there, you know.
And they will, because that moisture is going to go to the bottom.
Yeah, and then they'll anyway. They love the bottom. So I'll feed about 4 inches, but I'll fluff everything, and then I'll put the new bedding on, and then I've been doing it once a month, fluff and more bedding, fluff and more bedding. And then when I get a pretty good wedge built up, like when I get 2/3 of that thing full, then I don't fluff anymore. I don't water. I don't cover that back end. And I just keep that, you know, the front end wet and what they're working in. And I was concerned because there was still more, you know, they were still back in the back end. Well, they finally moved, and I finally got to harvest about half of the tub, about half of the tote. I finally got to, you know, scoop that out, and there was very few worms in that. And so then after I harvested the castings out of that, then I fluffed the whole thing and started back again. And I've got those. I've got them in a room that's in the barn. It's got a concrete floor, and I put those on. It's got wheels on it. I set those tubs on what do you call them? Floor dollies, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I bought them. I bought them from Walmart or bought it from somewhere. I ordered them in, but yeah, it was from Walmart. They were about the same length as the tub and about the same width. It fits perfectly, actually, under that tote. And then I can roll them around. Of course, they're on the floor. I'm not going to pick those. They're really heavy.
Yeah.
So that lets me roll them around and get them out of the way when when I'm not working on them. But then it also lets me put them out and set beside them and work in them.
So I wanted to try that this coming November in my garage because where I am in Central Florida, the temperatures in my garage, the way that, well, I mean, I think that from November till about early April, I could probably do something like that, which is actually a good time for because they'll breed better with the temperatures and all that stuff. And then I've got to convince myself that come May, I have to wind down. Instead of trying to keep things going because of the heat that we have here.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that and thank you for sharing this because I'd like to test this so that would be the next thing that I get to do as well for the Discovery Garden, because they have a project that they've included our project in. It's called a tiny house project. It's like a little miniature house on how to make things very sustainable. And they've included the worm resort, which is on the back end. And they're really doing us up. Well, I'm like, wow, this is great. But if I do something like that for 6 months inside the tiny house, I could do that wedge system and show people the wedge system with a big tote.
Yeah. Well, to me, it wasn't a permanent commitment because my first purchase was these red worms from a local guy. And I really didn't know what I had. There's a few blues in there, but in talking to Samantha and analyzing what these guys look like, how they act, we're relatively certain they're Andreas.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I'll keep working with them. I'll keep splitting them. They're doing a really good job of creating castings. And so I started with one. Now I've got three, because I split them because they overpopulated one. And so I just kept splitting them as they overpopulated. And I've got room to split another one, to go off and put another one out.
Okay, well, I'm very encouraged right now because I needed some type of a encouragement to try to work on a project in my garage. And this will be great because the timing is just right.
Well, do put it on one of those roll around floor dollies.
Yeah, because those things get very heavy.
It gets heavy.